And what is going on, everybody? Hope everybody's enjoying their day so far. We were back with another fantasy football live show talking about our starts and sits heading into week 12 of this NFL season, as well as recapping what everything that has happened in the fantasy spectrum. We'll talk about news and injuries that you need to know about heading into the new week of the NFL season, as we are just around the corner for both the trade deadline. The trade deadline will be in the last week of this November month. And we'll also have the fantasy playoffs starting in week number 14, some starting in week number 15. So there's only a couple of weeks of this fantasy football season, and we're going to start talking about the 2026 season, and that's what we'll be talking about on tonight's show. So as always, if you have any questions pertaining to start sits or last-minute trade questions, drop them down in the comments, and I'll get to it throughout the duration of the show. So tonight is how this is going to go. We're going to go through our studs and duds. Then we'll go to our news and injuries heading into week 12 and what has happened in week number 11. Then we'll get to our starts and sits, and then we'll close out with how our team did in week number 11, because this was a big matchup going up against another 7-win team. So the race in our league is also heating up in the playoff spectrum. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and kick off the show as we always do here with our studs and duds. We're going to go through the quarterback, running back, receiver, and tight end stud. And the quarterback stud, I know that this is a pretty vanilla pick, but man, this is why we draft Josh Allen. And this is why that he has been the most popular pick at the quarterback position for feels like the past couple of years. Mahomes has gone early. Lamar Jackson has also gone early in drafts as well. But Josh Allen on Sunday showed why he's one of the among elite in fantasy football. 317 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns to go along with 6 rushing attempts, 40 rushing yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns in the Bills' win over the Buccaneers this past Sunday. To put all that up with 46.68 fantasy points, he did have 2 interceptions in that game, so if it wasn't for those 1 or 2 interceptions, he would at least had 50 fantasy points. So 6 total touchdowns for Josh Allen. I'm sure if you did have Allen in your starting lineups, hopefully you were able to win. If you're facing off against him, you're probably hating playing fantasy football this week. But Josh Allen, one of the more elite quarterbacks that we have seen in fantasy football. He's definitely going to be a top 3 fantasy quarterback for as long, probably up to 5 years, even longer than that, because this Bills offense just continues to produce. So Josh Allen is our quarterback stud of the week. We will go on to the divisional rival, Travion Henderson. This game was on Thursday, the Pats and the Jets. 19 rushing attempts, 62 yards, 2 touchdowns to go along with 5 receptions, 31 yards, and a touchdown. And one of his best games of the season so far, 32.2 fantasy points. And this is exactly what a lot of people like myself and a lot of those who are in the fantasy football community in the preseason, we saw what happened in the preseason. Travion Henderson had a lot of burst, on the kickoff return for a touchdown. He had some big runs in the Patriots preseason games. But with Ramondre Stevenson being out for the past couple of weeks, Travion Henderson, it's this might be a similar situation that we saw with Rico Dowdle. If you remember Chuba Hubbard at the start of the season, he was the clear favorite to be the RB1 for the Panthers. And then Chuba Hubbard goes down with an injury, and then we see Rico Dowdle. Rico Dowdle had 30 fantasy points in back-to-back weeks, and ever since he hasn't given up that role. Could we see the same for Travion Henderson? Because we'll have to look at this week's injury report to see if the Pats do have Ramondre Stevenson on the injury report or not. And if Ramondre Stevenson is back, it's is Travion Henderson going to be the RB1 moving forward? So that's definitely keep an eye out. But if you did draft Travion Henderson, it was definitely questioning of maybe you shouldn't have drafted him. But now you are starting to see the fruits of the labor here with Travion Henderson. Amazing performance. It was a nice matchup going against the New York Jets. So I'm not going to say that was expected. Let's be honest, it was expected against one of the worst defenses in the league, especially with no Quinnen Williams and no Sauce Gardner. So Travion Henderson is definitely going to remain a must-start as they face off against the Cincinnati Bengals heading into Week 12. Now let's move on to the wide receiver stud of the week. That's going to be Ted McMillan of the Carolina Panthers. Another win for the Panthers. They swept their divisional rivals in the Atlanta Falcons this past weekend. 8 receptions, 130 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He continues to be the favorite target for Bryce Young. 33 fantasy points. So Ted McMillan, I had him actually as one of my favorite starts of the week in last week's show. So hopefully if yourself did put Ted McMillan into your lineups, and the Panthers definitely are going to have some nice matchups moving forward this week. I believe they have the San Francisco 49ers, so Ted McMillan still a start in fantasy football. Let's go ahead and get into a question here. Start Wandale, Emmanuel Wilson, or Mooney. If Josh Jacobs is not available, I would definitely start Emmanuel Wilson. I do like Darnell Mooney's matchup against New Orleans Saints. Wandale does have a tough matchup, so I'm between Emmanuel Wilson or Mooney, but I would take Emmanuel Wilson in the running back, especially if Josh Jacobs is out. If Jacobs, or miraculously plays, I would go Darnell Mooney, but for now, what we know, I would go with Emmanuel Wilson out of all 3 of those players. Now let's continue on for tight end stud. I know another pretty vanilla pick by Trey McBride. Continues to be one of the more elite tight ends in all of fantasy football here in the 2025 campaign. And this offense has not been that great. Kyler Murray has been out with an injury. He's going to be out for the next couple of weeks. Jacoby Brissett has taken over as QB1. You didn't have Marvin Harrison Jr., so you saw Trey McBride and Michael Wilson actually step up into a big role. Wilson had 18 targets. Trey McBride had over 10 catches. He did have 10 catches, 115 yards, 1 touchdown. The touchdown did come in garbage time because the 49ers had such a big of a lead in the Cardinals. Jacoby Brissett finished with 452 passing yards, so most of those came in the third and fourth quarter when they were down big. But nonetheless, if Jacoby Brissett going to be the starting quarterback, I think that Trey McBride is still going to be a very nice option for you heading into not only the end of this regular season, but also the playoffs. He did finish that game with 27.5 fantasy points, so kudos to McBride. He continues to be one of the best tight ends in the league. That is our studs of the week. Now let's go on to our duds of the week, and we're going to start off with Justin Herbert of the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, this Chargers offense have definitely been explosive the past couple of weeks. Justin Herbert has put up like 20-plus points. It feels like every single week. But this week didn't even get to 100 passing yards. He did have an interception in this game. He had a couple of rushing attempts to get him a little bit over 30 yards rushing on the day, but to only have 4.34 fantasy points in a matchup that I thought on paper was going to be nice because Jacksonville is the bottom 7 defense against opposing quarterbacks in fantasy. But Justin Herbert and that Chargers offense really struggled on Sunday. Because the next guy that we're going to talk about is Kamani Vidal of the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, this has been a roller coaster ride if you have Vidal on your lineups, especially with Martin Hampton. He's been out on the injury reserve. It's going to be curious to know if he is going to be coming back after this Chargers bye week, because the Chargers are on the bye here into week number 12. So do we see the return of Martin Hampton in week 13? That's definitely going to have to be a story for discussion for next week's show. But Kamani Vidal, I thought this was going to be a great matchup, but only 5 attempts, 13 yards, and 3.2 fantasy points. So he is heading into the bye week. And if you do have Martin Hampton back, obviously Kamani Vidal, you can't really put him in your starting lineup. So just keep in mind on that. If Martin Hampton returns, then Kamani Vidal's stock really goes down. But if Martin Hampton continues to miss time, then Kamani Vidal will still be the RB1 for still a really good offense in the Chargers. This was just a bad game for them. Now let's move on to the next one, because this was a defensive battle between the Eagles and the Lions on Sunday Night Football. Devontae Smith of the Eagles, who has really stepped in to being the wide receiver 1 for this offense, especially with the struggles that we're seeing with A.J. Brown. But 1 reception, 8 yards, 1.8 fantasy points. There wasn't really too much going for this offense. Jalen Hurts got the lone touchdown. They did their tush push. Saquon Barkley had 10 PPR fantasy points. A.J. Brown didn't really have too much. Dallas Goedert only had a couple of catches. So this was just an overall bad game. I know the Eagles did find a way to win this one, but Devontae Smith is our wide receiver dud. Before we get into our tight end dud, we do have another question coming in. Who for my wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3 and flex spot got Devontae Adams at wide receiver 1 and Jonathan Taylor and TreVeyon Henderson at RB1 and 2. Your wide receivers are Tez Johnson, Parker Washington, Jordan Addison, and Jacoby Myers. Out of all those running backs, I guess we'll go to the running backs here. Zach Charbonnet, Emmanuel Wilson, or Josh Jacobs got Debo and Quentin Johnson on the bye. I'm definitely starting in your flex Emmanuel Wilson or Josh Jacobs. I really don't want any part of Zach Charbonnet. I think that Kenneth Walker is still the RB1 in this one. Kenneth Walker also has a nice matchup against the Tennessee Titans. So I would prefer the Green Bay running back out of those. So Emmanuel Wilson or Josh Jacobs. Then to the wide receivers, I don't really like Jacoby Myers in this one. Tez Johnson, I know, is coming off of a bad game, but he does have a nice matchup this week. So I would go with Parker Washington out of all those receivers, and I'm going to go with Jordan Addison as well. I think that Tez Johnson has just been a roller coaster ride. Jordan Addison has had touchdown production. So in your wide receiver 2 and 3, you're going with Washington and Addison, and then you're starting either Emmanuel Wilson or Josh Jacobs. We'll continue on with some questions here. Start one this week. Purdy, Brissett, or Trevor got Bo Nix on bye. Who is better rest of season, Bo Nix or Brock Purdy? I definitely think in the offensive wise, I would go with Brock Purdy. You definitely have some more weapons. Christian McCaffrey has definitely been solid this season. Bo Nix has really been up and down, so I would trust Brock Purdy. Bo Nix, like in the past couple of weeks, they've had some tough matchups, and rest of the season they have some tough matchups too. So I would trust Brock Purdy the rest of the season. Now, going back to this question, either Brock Purdy, Jacoby Brissett, or Trevor Lawrence, I'm actually going to go with Jacoby Brissett. I definitely think that Brissett, you even saw last week when they were getting blown out, he still puts up over like 27 fantasy points, like gets you over 400 passing yards. So Jacoby Brissett, especially if they do get Marvin Harrison Jr. back in this offense. So I know that's surprising, might be surprising to you, but I do like Jacoby Brissett, especially with Bo Nix dealing on the bye week, because you are going to be having some more quarterbacks heading into the bye in week 12, week 13, and week 14. Let's go on to some more questions. Should I drop White if Bucky is back for Pollard, Knight, Carter, Isaiah Davis? I definitely think if Bucky is back, you could definitely drop Rachaad White because Rachaad White looks like he's already being taken over by Sean Tucker. So Rachaad White, we will see what his role is. But yes, if Bucky Irvin does come back from injury reserve, I would be fine picking up either the Arizona Cardinal running back Pollard or Isaiah Davis. Let's continue on. Start 2 this week. Wandale, Shakir, and Sticky Ricky have Purdy also. I would definitely like to stack of Purdy and Ricky Pearsall this week. I'm also going to go with Wandale Robinson in that offense. You know, Wandale has really taken over as your wide receiver 1. Khalil Shakir, you're going to have your boom or bust games. I'd rather just go with the upside of Wandale Robinson getting all the targets, especially if Jackson Dart is off of concussion protocol this week, because Wandale had a nice matchup, but he definitely flourishes with Jackson Dart on the field. Let's move on here. Since it's handcuff season, which 3 are best? Blake Corum, B-Rob, Tootin Stevenson, Emmanuel Wilson, Knight, Carter. Also, I have DJ Moore on my bench. Is he droppable to get 4 of those guys? Yeah, I definitely like all these handcuffs. I think that my priority would be for 2 of these guys. It would be Tootin and Emmanuel Wilson. Blake Corum as well. He would also be a nice option. Stevenson, like I mentioned earlier, I think it's going to become like a Carolina Panthers running back situation where Stevenson is going to become the RB2, and B-Rob is just not going to produce, especially with a healthy CMC. So if you had to pick from 3, I would go with Emmanuel Wilson 1, Tootin 2, and Corum 3. And definitely, if you like a lot of wide receivers, DJ Moore hasn't really provided you too much this season, so he's definitely droppable for any of those guys, but that would definitely be a high priority. Let's continue on here. Start 1 this week, DJ Moore or Khalil Shakir. I'm just going to go with the better offensive option, Khalil Shakir, in that matchup. And let's go on to some more comments here. Have Dart as my QB. Also have Joe Burrow in my IR if he comes back. Should I pick up Bo Nix just in case Dart gets hit again or Joe Burrow doesn't come back? If so, I'll have to drop DJ Moore, B-Rob, or Tootin. I definitely don't think you need to pick up Bo Nix, especially with Joe Burrow coming back. He was a full participant in practice today, so I expect his return sooner because this Bengals offense really needs him. Because, Joe Flacco has been nice in some games, but Joe Burrow is definitely going to be coming back, and I definitely think that Jackson Dart, if he doesn't come back this week, he should be back next week. But Bo Nix isn't like the type of quarterback that I'm looking to immediately pick up. So I would hold on to both Dart and Burrow for now. Let's go on to another question here. Start 2 this week. Shepard, Ishivas, Dyke, Yamor, Coker, Leggett, Tillman, Judy, John Mechie, Burden. Did I miss any other bums? I just won 10 points each. Somehow laughing my ass off. Yeah, this is definitely a tricky situation here. I think out of the Tennessee Titans, I'd rather Dyke at this point. Looks like he has taken over as that wide receiver one for this offense. I guess you could just go with either Coker or Leggett of the Carolina Panthers. That Panthers offense has been rolling as of late. So I'm going to go with Xavier Leggett, actually. I definitely think that he could definitely get a touchdown in this week's matchup. So I'll go with Dyke and Leggett out of all those. So if you have any more questions, definitely feel free to comment. We will be here for the next 20 or 30 minutes or so as we continue on here with the show. Let's close it out here with our tight end dud, Kyle Pitts of the Atlanta Falcons. Now, this Falcons offense, especially with injury news that we're going to get in here too, and especially with Drake London potentially being out this week, but heading into this matchup against the Carolina Panthers, I thought that this was a plus matchup for Kyle Pitts and this offense to really shine, and the exact opposite happened as Kyle Pitts only got 2 receptions and 14 yards, 3.4 fantasy points. So we'll see what the production is with Kirk Cousins, but a lot of these, like even Bijan Robinson, Kirk Cousins hasn't really done great. So a lot of these Atlanta Falcons, receivers, running back, and tight end are definitely going to go down in all my rest of the season rankings. Now, all right, let's go ahead and answer another question there. What's up, man? Pick up one flex, Watson, Woody, or Knight. Do you think Benson comes back this week? If he does, are you starting? Actually, out of all those, I definitely think that Trey Benson could come back, but if he doesn't, I like Woody Marks this week. He has a plus matchup against one of the worst rushing defenses in the league in the Tennessee Titans. So Woody Marks would be, my option out of that if he's not already in your lineup. So I would definitely start Woody Marks. That's a plus matchup for me. Let's continue on with some more. Ooh, we have a trade question here. Trade CD and Woody Marks for JSN roster, JT, Judkins, Marks, Harvey, Tootin, Lamb, London, Odunze, and Diggs. If you can get Jackson Smith and Jigba at that price, I would definitely take that. I know that you have to give up CeeDee Lamb and Woody Marks, but you have already a nice combo of running backs with Jonathan Taylor and Quinshon Judkins. If you have to give up a guy like, CeeDee Lamb, you would have JSN, London, Odunze, and Diggs. Even if you don't have London this week, I would rather just have JSN the rest of season because I have him over CeeDee Lamb. So, yes, I would definitely do that trade. You got to go for the championship, so you might as well pull the trigger on this trade. Now let's go on to the next one. Pick one to stream this week, Bagley, McPherson, or Borealis. To be honest with you, kickers are definitely going to be a nice option for you this week. Bagley does play the Los Angeles, not the Los Angeles Rams. Do they? No, they do play no, they don't play the Los Angeles Rams. Who do the Colts play? Gosh, I'm going to have to go to my fantasy starts. But McPherson and Borealis, I'm going to have to get back with you on this one because I know that I have the matchups on my fantasy starts and sits. So I'll go back to this question once we get to that. Let's go ahead and go to some we do have some. Okay, they play the Chiefs. Okay, well, what I'm looking for in kickers, I always want to go with the kickers who are playing the best defense out of all of them. So actually, I would go with Bagley in that one because the Colts, they might get past the 50, but they're going to kick a lot of field goals. So that's exactly what I want. McPherson and Borealis have plus matchups. I think their offenses are going to score more touchdowns. So out of all the kickers, I would go with Bagley against the Kansas City Chiefs because we literally just saw what the Chiefs did this past week. It wasn't that great of a matchup, but I'm going to go with Marvin Bagley in that one. Let's go to our news injuries heading into Week 12. We do have some big starting quarterback news. Shedeur Sanders is going to be the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. Now, I know a lot of people don't have too many Browns on their roster outside of Quinshon Judkins. I don't know if a lot of people are still carrying, maybe Harold Fannin. Harold Fannin's still a plus matchup, David Njoku as well. But wide receivers like Tillman, Jerry Jeudy. I mean, Shedeur Sanders starting isn't really going to do too much for me. You are still starting a guy like Quinshon Judkins. He is still going to be back, but that's some definitely big-time news, especially with Dylan Gabriel out of concussion, being in concussion protocol. Like I mentioned earlier, I was talking about the Joe Burrow situation. Joe Burrow has, was listed as a full participant So we will see, with this being a full participant, I talked about on last week's show that his potential date is, coming back around Thanksgiving. So this would definitely be a plus. You have Jamar Chase suspended this week because he spit on a guy. So T. Higgins will be the wide receiver one for that offense. So we'll see what the Bengals do this weekend. Lamar is back on the injury report again, this time for an ankle injury, but I do expect Lamar Jackson to be back on the field. That was definitely a dud game for them against the Cleveland Browns and not really going for that offense. But they were able to win the game. That's all that they care about. But that was definitely a dud performance of Lamar, not even getting to 10 fantasy points this past Sunday. Rodgers' playing status will be a safety thing, so that's just I don't know if a lot of people are playing Aaron Rodgers this week, but something to keep in mind of. With Eddie Pinheiro, and his status in doubt this week, looks like Matt Gay has joined the 49ers practice squad. So could be, I don't know if many people are going to be picking up Matt Gay, but just keep an eye on that if you do have Eddie Pinheiro as your starting kicker. The Saints today cut Brandon Cooks, but who's really starting? Like outside of Chris Olave, that's the only wide receiver I'm starting. Alvin Kamara, probably a sit this week. That is a tough matchup going against the Atlanta Falcons, though. Rico Dowdle did have a nice game this past weekend. Then Juwan Johnson also a start for that. Let's go to some more news here. Looks like just keep an eye out if Jackson Dart is going to be available. Justin Fields was benched, so Tyrod Taylor will be getting the start for the Jets. That's not the only time that we have seen Tyrod Taylor get the start for the Jets. Michael Penix Jr. is out for the season, so we're going to be having Kirk Cousins being the starting quarterback for this offense. So we're just going to see what everyone's production is going to be, because so far it hasn't been great for both Bijan, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts. Let's go on. Looks like Brock Purdy is going to be returning this week, so that's going to be some good news there. And I believe that is all of our news here. Like I talked about, Jamar Chase is out. CJ Stroud is out for tomorrow night's matchup against the Buffalo Bills. So Davis Mills is the starting quarterback. But Davis Mills, CJ Stroud, Nico Collins has still been a fantastic option. Same with Dalton Schultz, Woody Marks as well. So Texans have a nice matchup against the Buffalo Bills. Excuse me of that. I know I talked about Woody Marks. I thought they played Titans. My bad. I'm getting mixed up on these matchups. That was last week. But that's still a very good matchup for Woody Marks, because look at what Sean Tucker did against the Buffalo Bills. So I apologize for that. But I believe that is everything as we will now shift gears to our fantasy starts and sits for week 12 of this NFL season. So let's go ahead and dive in. As we always do here for the starts, we'll give you two of each. So 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, and 2 tight ends. So let's go ahead and kick things off with Drake May of the New England Patriots. A nice matchup going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. The defense have allowed 19-plus points to 6 quarterbacks so far here in this campaign, and Drake May has been sensational this season. Could be a potential MVP. Who knows? Still a long way to go, but the Patriots offense have definitely been the storyline, at least for their division in the AFC East. But nice matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals. Could definitely be one where it could get high scoring. I know the Patriots defense has been solid. Bengals defense hasn't, on the other hand, but especially with the receivers, the way that they're playing, Stephon Diggs has really stepped up in a couple of weeks, especially with Kayshon Boutte being out. But Drake May is a plus start and a plus matchup this Sunday. We do have another question. Mark Andrews or Kyle Pitts with no London, like I mentioned. Kirk Cousins in production with Kyle Pitts just hasn't really been there. I would trust Mark Andrews in this situation. I mean, it's just a better quarterback. I trust Lamar Jackson out of Kirk Cousins, so I'm going to go with Mark Andrews out of those 2 tight ends. Now let's move on to our next quarterback start of the week. That's going to be Matthew Stafford of the Los Angeles Rams. And Stafford, if you picked him up, in the past couple of weeks, might just be one of the best waiver wire adds of the quarterback position. This Rams offense has been on fire this past couple of weeks. And Tampa Bay, this could be another high-scoring shootout that Tampa Bay is involved in. 2 solid quarterbacks going at it, Matthew Stafford, Baker Mayfield. And this Buccaneers defense have given up an average of 22.5 points since week 8. So this Buccaneers defense has really been struggling the past couple of weeks. You just saw him give up almost 50 fantasy points to Josh Allen. Now, that was because Josh Allen ran it in for 3 touchdowns. Matthew Stafford is going to provide that. but the passing volume is definitely there with this offense with Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. So Matthew Stafford could be another high-scoring shootout. Pair all that up. Matthew Stafford is definitely a nice option if you have him on your bench and maybe need a quarterback to start, especially with Bo Nix and company being on the bye week. Now let's move on to our running backs. We are going to continue to ride with a hot hand here. Enrico Dowdle of the Carolina Panthers. Talk about their matchup against the San Francisco 49ers. This 49ers defense, has really been stout against the pass, but against the run, they have allowed 8 running backs to score more than 14 points. Enrico Dowdle, that's really what the last couple of weeks has been. He put up 15 points. Last week, he did have a touchdown against that, Falcons defense. But Rico Dowdle, like I mentioned, has really taken over this RB1 role. He gets a couple of receptions, but he's going to get you there. And the rushing yards in his Week 12 projected totals is at 78.6. He is projected to get 16.2 points. So we'll see how close of a matchup this is, because we saw in a blowout last week, the Cardinals were getting blown out, and they were able to get it through the pass. So hopefully for Rico Dowdle, the Panthers can keep this one close against the 49ers. Now let's move on to our next RB start. We haven't really talked about too much of this Seattle Seahawks running back because it just has been a dumpster fire this season between Walker and Zach Charbonnet. You just don't know which running back is going to do what each week. But Kenneth Walker, really good matchup. It's like now or never for Kenneth Walker. Against Tennessee Titans, who has been among the worst defenses against the rush. This is a defense that allowed almost 5 yards per carry to the running back position in 2025. So Kenneth Walker, honestly, his best performance last week, over 20 fantasy points if you do play in PPR formats. So Kenneth Walker, if you do have him on your bench, I'll plug him in at least into your flex spot. This is a really nice matchup going against the Tennessee Titans. Now let's move on to our wide receivers. I know this is also a controversial pick. A.J. Brown has definitely been one of the more disappointing wide receivers in all fantasy football this season, but this is also a nice matchup going against the Dallas Cowboys. This has been the defense that allowed the most points to wide receivers in 2025. So I expect a big bounce back overall for this Eagles offense. I know that people are going to say, well, the Cowboys just shut down the Raiders. But the Raiders are one of the worst offenses in the league this season. The Eagles will bounce back through the pass, whether that's A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith. So I know he's definitely been one of the most inconsistent wide receivers, but I do like this matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. Now let's move on to our next wide receiver. I know I had Jameson Williams, I believe, either last week or the week before in one of our starts. It just didn't really work out too well, but that was just a really tough matchup going against the Philadelphia Eagles. He does face off against the New York Giants, so the Lions are continuing their NFC East tour there, as the Giants have allowed 14 or more points to 14 wide receivers. So the Lions, one of their worst offensive performance since week number 1 in their loss against the Green Bay Packers. But I do expect a big bounce back for Jared Goff in this offense and Jameson Williams. He is projected to get 65.9 receiving yards, 13.5 fantasy points in PPR format. So I do expect also a big bounce back. So both of our wide receivers, I know they had dud performances, but I'm definitely expecting them to bounce back here in week 12 in some nice matchups. Now let's move on to the tight end. We will continue with our Philadelphia Eagles with Dallas Goedert. Now, anybody in that game really didn't have that great of a performance if your name wasn't Jahmyr Gibbs in that matchup. But we're going to continue by the plus matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. This Cowboys defense against opposing tight ends have given up at least 12 points to at least 4 tight ends since week 5 of the season. So the Cowboys have definitely been vulnerable if you are opposing tight end. And Dallas Goedert has definitely had some big blow-up games. We've seen weeks where he's put up a couple of touchdowns, get you at least 20 fantasy points. Could that happen? Definitely so against the Dallas Cowboys defense, that has picked up some steam as of late. But I think that's more of some nice matchups that they have had in the past couple of weeks. Now let's move on to our last tight end that we're going to be talking about here, Kate Otten of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Otten also didn't really have that great performance, but going up against Los Angeles Rams, I know on paper that is a tough defense to go up against. However, against the tight ends, they've allowed 9+ points to at least 7 of that position. So Kate Otten is projected to get 42.3 receiving yards and projected to score 9.7 points. So like I mentioned, this could be one of the more higher scoring games of the week in between the Rams and the Bucs. So if you're chasing points and you need a tight end, definitely go pick up Kate Otten. Now let's move on to our Week 12 fantasy sits. We're going to give you one of each position, starting with the quarterback, Daniel Jones of the Indianapolis Colts. The toughest matchup that the Colts are definitely going to have on paper against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, the Chiefs have really been phenomenal at home. They have yet to allow a quarterback to score at least 16.8 points this season. The Chiefs, it's definitely desperate for a win at this point. They're just hovering around 500. They really need to get on a winning streak if they do want to get it back into the playoff race. And Daniel Jones and this Colts offense, especially coming off of the bye week, definitely need that one. But Daniel Jones, this is just a really tough matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs. And if you have any quarterback going up against the Chiefs, it probably won't really go well. Now let's move on to our next one. That's going to be the running back, DeAndre Swift of the Chicago Bears. I know the Pittsburgh Steelers has been a defense that we've really been striving for in these fantasy starts. But this week, they've allowed just 2 touchdowns to opposing running backs since week 6 of this NFL season. DeAndre Swift had an okay game last week in the Bears' comeback victory against the Minnesota Vikings. So DeAndre Swift a sit this week. Now let's move on to our next wide receiver. We're going to stay in the Chiefs versus Colts matchup. Xavier Worthy of the Kansas City Chiefs. Another tough matchup going up against the Indianapolis Colts, who've allowed the fewest points to wide receivers since week 8 of this NFL season. I do expect, Rashee Rice, ever since he has been returning, he has been the focal point for this offense. Same with Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce had 5 receptions, 81 yards, even in the loss against the Denver Broncos on Sunday afternoon. But Xavier Worthy, especially against that secondary, that's going to be a tough one for Xavier Worthy to really get to that projected total at 10.4 points. So if you have any more wide receiver options on your bench, I would stay away from Xavier Worthy this week. Now let's close it out with our sits with TJ Hockenson of the Minnesota Vikings. Now, Hockenson has definitely been a disappointment as of late. A tough matchup going up against the Green Bay Packers, and Hockenson has been held at single digits in 6 of his last games. I know what people are going to go with that. But TJ Hockenson definitely has been a disappointment this season, especially with his ADP. He was being drafted after guys like George Kittle, Brock Bowers. He was like the 4th tight end going off of the board in all of our fantasy football drafts before the season got going here. So definitely a disappointing season overall. Tough matchup, and especially how cold that he's been. If you have any other tight ends, I would rather go with like Jawan Johnson, even Kate Otten that we talked about as well. So if you have TJ Hockenson on your lineup, try and find another tight end and plug somebody else in, because this is definitely a tough matchup for TJ Hockenson. So that is our fantasy starts and sits. We're going to go ahead now and go to our team recap to see how we did in week number 11. As you could tell, we fell. After winning 3 in a row, we now fall to 7-4. We lose to Mushrooms 119.24 to 114.16. Mushrooms goes to 8-3. This would have been a huge win for us to move to 8-3. Now we are the 4th place team. So we are just hovering around that playoff spot, because in this format, only 4 teams get into the playoffs. So we'll definitely check on that. But definitely a tough matchup for us. The call at quarterback, especially with, I believe, let's see, I thought we had a quarterback on the bye. I guess we didn't. But we honestly had 2 tough matchups with Bo Nix and Jared Goff. Like, Bo Nix only had 12 points. Jared Goff had 12. And I picked up Joe Flacco. This was a nice matchup against Pittsburgh Steelers. However, that blew up right in our faces. He only got 9 points. But we'll go through the matchup. Patrick Mahomes, that he had in his quarterback, 13 points. Where we really got hurt was Bijan Robinson dropping a 30 bomb on our head. Kamani Vidal only had 3 points. Our running backs, really did solid. Saquon had 10 points. It was a tough matchup, but if you can get at least 10 points in that, Chase Brown had a nice matchup, even in the blowout loss against the Steelers, 18.7. Looking at the wide receivers, for our wide receivers, it was pretty much even. JSN had 20.6, Drake London at 18.9, Mike Ibuka had 9, and Devontae Smith had 1.8. So a little disappointment for Mike Ibuka. George Kittle did get 2 touchdowns in the win against the Cardinals, good enough for 24.7. But the bad thing was our opponent had Travis Kelce, who pretty much had the same game, 24.1. Wan'Dale compared to Romeo Doubs. Doubs got us 9.3. Well, Wan'Dale Robinson had 7.6. Defense-wise, pretty similar. Seahawks had 4 in that tough one against the Rams. Packers had 6. Pinheiro had 14. And Chase McLaughlin had 8. So looking at where we probably could have went was not really too much. Like we could have started Bam Knight over Romeo Dobbs. Troy Franken over Romeo Dobbs would have gotten us 3 points. But that's just how fantasy football works. That was definitely, a bad loss for us. That definitely would have put us in the driver's seat for at least, getting the number 2 or number 3 seed in the playoffs. We'll go through the rest of the scores. Looks like Tyler's talented team got the win over Raquel's remarkable team. So Tyler's talented team moves to 3-8, 2-9. Probably both of these teams won't be in playoff discussion. The Birds, at this point, probably going to clinch the number 1 seed at any moment. Falls to 3-8. The Birds moves to 9-2. Now, this is where this thing is really going to get topsy-turvy as Ben's best team beat MDR. It would have been nice if Ben's best team would have fallen to keep us in 3rd place. However, that just didn't happen. And the next one, Jeff's scary team is at 4-7, and Doge is at 6-5. So Jeff's scary team does get the win. Let's go ahead and look at the standings. As looks like we are now in 4th place as you have seen, but we will see where we are in the standings. So it looks like the Birds is the only team to clinch. Jeff's scary team, Tyler's talented team, and Raquel's remarkable team all being eliminated from playoff contention. Like I mentioned, the top 4 do get into the playoffs, so we're only a game above being in the playoffs. So the Birds is at 9-2. He's the number 1. Mushrooms now solidly in 2nd place. And we are tied 3rd with Ben's best team, 3-4. But since he has the points, he takes 3rd place. So 2 teams at 7-4. And then you have 2 teams as well at 6-5. So just looking at the points for, we definitely need to leapfrog Ben's best team to get back in the 3rd place. Honestly, we just need to win this week. But we are 3rd in points for, and we are also 3rd in points against. So that's just how the overall league is at. Looks like the Birds only team to clinch at this point. If we can get a win to get back, to 8-4, and maybe Mushroom loses, get to 8-4 as well. Because I believe, looking at the points, we are above Mushroom. So if Ben's best team and Mushrooms falls this week, we could all leapfrog into the number 2 seed. Now let's go on to our team. Look at where we need to be making our moves. We'll also go through what happened in the waiver wire to see what we need to do. First thing first is Joe Flacco be gone. All right, so we're going to be dropping Joe Flacco here. We have our 2 quarterbacks with Jared Goff. Bo Nix is on the bye week, but I think at this point I just don't want any part to do with Joe Flacco. We will see if we have any other quarterbacks that we can potentially add to the roster here. We are probably going to be going with a 2 tight ends set here with Tyler Warren and George Kittle, though. Brian Thomas, we will see if he's back out in Kamara. Don't really like his matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. Out of all these other guys, I just don't really want. For now, we will go with Jared Goff with the Giants. We will see our option at a quarterback. Looking outside of that, we could add another player to our bench, so we could definitely do that. So we will go with this roster for now, but let's go ahead and go to the waiver wire to see what players are available, and we will see if we need to make any more changes heading into week 12 of the season. So first, let's go up to our quarterbacks. I'll also give you the players that I think that you should also add as well if you did miss out on some of these key guys for this set of waiver wire. But look at the available quarterbacks, at least in this league. You do have Jordan Love against the Minnesota Vikings, Sam Darnold against the Tennessee Titans. So if you really need a streaming quarterback, go after Sam Darnold and Jordan Love against the Minnesota Vikings. These have been 2 defenses that have struggled as of late. Aaron Rodgers against Chicago, and then Justin Fields isn't starting, and Jacoby Brissett against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Brissett, Darnold, and Love would definitely be 3 streaming quarterbacks that I would pick up. But I think in this league, I think that I'm A-okay with going with Jared Goff against the New York Giants. Looking at the available running backs in this league, you do have R.J. Harvey on the bye, but that would definitely be a nice add the rest of the way. Zach Charbonnet. Emmanuel Wilson, I definitely think we are going to pick up immediately, because if he does play this week, I think we are probably going to be starting him over George Kittle. So let's go ahead and pick up Emmanuel Wilson. But I will be going back to the waiver wire and just going through all the available players. that I think that would definitely be worth add heading into the new week of this NFL season. Now let's move on to the running backs. We already talked about Emmanuel Wilson that I picked up. That definitely a nice matchup. But really, outside of that, if Trey Benson does come back, it is a tough matchup though, so I probably wouldn't go pick up Trey Benson, but could be a nice option rest of season. And really, other running backs, not really too much are really catching my eye. Definitely keep an eye on Byshell Tuden as a handcuff running back. Same with Tajay Spears, Sean Tucker, especially if Bucky Irving continues to miss some time. Moving on to the receivers, you have Alec Pierce, Matthew Golden, Trey Tucker, Christian Watson. I mean, none of these guys are really catching my eye. I definitely think Michael Wilson is a nice add, especially if Marvin Harrison Jr. is out this week. Michael Wilson had 18 targets. Outside of that, Parker Washington against the Arizona Cardinals would also be an add. Jaden Higgins, Xavier Legette would be a couple of wide receivers I would be eyeing at. Moving at the tight ends, we have Hunter Henry available, which is bizarre at this point. I mean, if we didn't have George Kittle and Tyler Warren, I would definitely go pick him up. So if you do have Hunter Henry available, go pick him up. This is a very nice matchup. I think that Hunter Henry is going to explode this week. And really outside of that, Theo Johnson has a nice matchup going against the Lions. Schultz has a nice matchup against the Bills. I know that it says here the Bills have really been solid against the tight ends, but Dalton Schultz has really been consistent. Juwan Johnson has a tough matchup, but really like the production in that offense, especially with Tyler Shuck. And Colson Loveland has a really nice matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers, so that would be a couple of tight ends that I'll be eyeing to add to my lineup. Defensive streamers, we always like to go through this. Rams versus Tampa Bay wouldn't touch. Bills versus the Texans would be an okay matchup, especially with Davis Mills, but the Bills defense, hasn't been wowing me as of late. Jags against the Cardinals would be a nice matchup. Falcons against the Saints. I mean, the Falcons have been an up and down roller coaster ride this week. So really out of all these, maybe the Jaguars against the Cardinals, but really none of these defenses are wowing me this week. All right, so that is it for our waiver wire ad. I think that's pretty much how we're going to rock with the roster. I think for now I think we are going to go with Emmanuel Wilson over George. Actually, I don't know. That's a pretty tough call. I think we are just going to go for two tight end set. I definitely think if we do have Emmanuel Wilson starting against the Minnesota Vikings, I'll probably go with him over George Kittle, or maybe even start him over like Chase Brown, because Chase Brown has a tough matchup. So we'll keep an eye on that for the next couple of days. But this is going to be our starting lineup in week number 12. Jared Goff against the Giants. Saquon and Chase Brown will be our two running backs. JSN and Ibuka will be our two wide receivers. Going to go for two tight end set for now, but that could definitely change with the latest news to Emmanuel Wilson, Tyler Warren, and George Kittle. Seattle, definitely one of their best matchups of the season against the Tennessee Titans. Could be another double-digit outing for the Seahawks. And Chase McLaughlin against the Rams. I do want to look at McLaughlin's game log to see how he's been. I mean, he's been a top 10 fantasy kicker. Let's see what he did. I mean, 8 points, that's solid. So I think we are going to continue with Chase McLaughlin as our kicker. And we go to our matchup. And this was definitely one of our disappointing losses of our early season. If you remember, had 5 or 6 starting players in his roster. I guess he just didn't check. But we ended up losing in that one, as you're going to see here. I think the score is probably going to pop up from that previous matchup. But this is a must-win. As you see there, we lost 125-90. And look at our projections. We are projected to win this one 133-77. But I'm not going to say, just because he has Joe Burrow and Devon Achane on the bye doesn't mean that it's going to be an easy matchup, because look what happened in week number 3. We had all of our starting lineup, and we still didn't even put up 100 points. So this is definitely a must-win for us. There is zero possibility that we can come away with a loss, because if we do, then our playoff chances are going to slowly dwindle away. But for now, we are projected to win this one. Looking at our other matchups, the Birds is projected to beat Raquel's remarkable team. I believe that the Birds is probably going to win that one. Look at their previous matchup. The Birds took that one 158-99. Going to the next matchup, this is definitely going to be probably a blowout the way that it's looking at. The Ben's best team is projected to win this one pretty comfortably. MDR and Jeff's scary team. This is definitely going to be a close one to watch. Definitely pulling for Jeff's scary team, especially if NDR, we just need the 6 and 5 teams to start losing to really separate ourselves from the rest of the pack. And this is definitely going to be another interesting one, too. We definitely need to pull for Doge to beat Rushrooms to try and climb back into that number 2 seed. Doge right now projected to win that matchup. That's going to be it for tonight's live show. I definitely appreciate all of your comments and questions. Hope you continue to win in your fantasy football leagues and get closer to clinching that fantasy football playoff spot. So continue to tune into our channel as we'll keep up with the latest fantasy football news and also what's happening in the college football world. We'll be back next week with another fantasy live show, probably either going to be on Wednesday night, on Tuesday. Probably going to get it in for the holiday on Thanksgiving on Thursday. So definitely stay tuned to that on next week. But we'll be back next week recapping what happened in week number 12 and looking ahead at week number 13 as we start to look ahead an inch closer to the start of these fantasy football playoffs. So I appreciate everybody tuning in, chime in to your questions, and I'll catch you all next time. So long for now.